On a rain-slick night in 1978, the girl I loved more than anyone asked me to drive away from a man we thought we'd killed. And 40 years later, a hospice nurse humming our song told me she was our daughter. Hey there, everybody. It's your old pal Ray Harper from Mind-Blowing Stories. Before we dive in, do me a kindness, hit that subscribe button. I checked the numbers and 96% of you beautiful people watch, but don't subscribe. That's a gut punch for an old fella trying to keep this channel going, I won't lie. So please subscribe, give this a like, and drop a comment afterward. Tell me where you're listening from, or if you've ever carried a love for decades the way I did. All right, let me take you back to the summer that started it all. I grew up in a town outsiders forget before their taillights cross the county line. We had a paper mill that perfumed the air like boiled eggs, a bowling alley that smelled of beer and shoe polish, and a river that looked silver at dusk if you squinted hard enough. I was 20, working days at the Sinclair station, changing oil and flirting with the future like it was a friendly dog. Nights I played guitar on my porch, finger-picking the same 4 chords and thinking they sounded like destiny. The road out of town ran straight past the Henderson grain elevators, and some evenings I'd drive out there just to watch headlights burn through the wheat dust, imagining one of them would be mine, aimed at a bigger life. The summer fair always made the town forget itself for a week. Someone hauled in a rickety Ferris wheel and a tilt-a-whirl with peeling paint, and the Methodist ladies formed an assembly line of pies. I met her behind the milk bottle game, where a guy with a cigarette stuck to his lip swore up and down the bottles weren't glued together. Her name was Laura Bennett. She was 17, with a braid the color of corn silk and eyes that could make a man think twice about every silly plan he'd ever had. She wore a red skirt and white keds and carried a paperback with a cracked spine tucked under one arm like a secret. I won her a stuffed bear that immediately shed a handful of fake fur onto her skirt. She laughed. This bear has mange. That's how you know it's authentic, I said. Mange is extra. She laughed again, and it felt like some hand had reached inside my chest and rung a bell. We sat on the hay bales watching kids crush snow cones into their faces, and she told me she wanted to be a teacher and leave town, but in a good way, not the kind of leaving that's just running. Her father was a police captain. Her mother was a church soprano so good that even our pastor tried to time his sermons so she could sing more, and he could talk less. We were both restless in the exact same shape. That's how it felt. You meet someone like that, and it's like your insides recognize each other. We started meeting up at the diner on River Road, ordering Cokes we couldn't afford, and splitting a basket of fries. We walked the bridge at midnight and watched barges slide by like slow, patient animals. We passed notes in the bookstore. Yeah, the town had one bookstore, a stubborn place that smelled like dust and paper and coffee. She underlined sentences and left the book for me to discover. I'd write a tiny reply at the bottom of the page, something clumsy and big-hearted like, I feel that too, or maybe love is just paying attention at the right time. Her father didn't like me. I was known, not trouble exactly, but the kind of boy who changes his own oil and thinks a guitar is a plan. He wanted her at the top schools with boys who could wear suits without looking like they were borrowed. Laura and I kept us quiet. She'd call from a payphone next to the laundromat. I'd plan our meetings as careful as a bank heist. It made it sweeter and meaner at once. The night the world flipped over was a September night, warm enough that the asphalt smelled like someone had heated it on a stove. I had a 72 Dart with a bench seat, a dented fender, and a radio that would only tune to stations with too much static to be sure what song you were hearing. We parked by the river, the cottonwoods turning their leaves inside out at the hint of a storm. Laura was tense, fingers worrying the hem of her sweater. My dad's got a new guy at the station, she said. They talk in whispers. He looks, I don't know, wrong. How wrong? Like someone you don't want to owe money to, she said. He's around our house all the time now. He stares too long. I put my hand over hers. 2 more months, I reminded her. Then you're in Columbus, and I'm going to save up and come after you. We'll figure it out. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Promise me we will. I promise. We stayed late. When the first thunder grumbled, we drove back along River Road. It's a bad road when it rains. No shoulder, the river right there like it's waiting. A shape appeared in the headlights, sudden and terrible. A man standing too close to the edge of the asphalt, flapping his arms like he was trying to find his balance. It looked like he stepped into us. Laura screamed. I grabbed the wheel and yanked, but we clipped him. The car jolted, a sound like a sack of wet wood bouncing, then the dull slap of something hitting the roadway. I slammed the brakes. Rain started in fat drops. The man lay in the road, twisted, one arm under him. I don't know how long my body took to make me move, but it felt like a month in the split second it actually was. I ran to him. He was breathing, thank God. He was breathing, wheezing like a bad harmonica. His eyes opened, and he looked past me, like he'd seen this road 100 times and it finally recognized him. We should call an ambulance, and I said, voice way too high. Laura! She was out of the car, her face white as paper. She kept saying the same thing. Oh God! Oh God! Oh God! I dragged him toward the shoulder because there were no hazard lights, and I didn't want a truck to come through and finish what we'd started. Rain got harder. The man's chest rattled. He tried to stand, panicked, and lurched toward the guardrail. Laura grabbed his shoulder. He swung his arm like he thought she was hurting him and stumbled away. And then he wasn't on the road anymore. He was over the rail in the brush, sliding, grabbing, and you know how sounds get strange when your brain is trying to keep up? The way his shoes scraped rocks sounded like cutlery on a plate. There was a splash, not deep, not dramatic, just a low, ugly slop. The river right at that bend is slow, but it's strong if you meet it wrong. It took him. I could lie to you and say I dove after him, but I didn't. I skidded down the brush and reached for him and yelled. And Laura yelled, but the water was black and fast, and we were two dumb kids with our hands empty. We stood there like statues getting rained on until headlights curved across the bend and a horn leaned on forever. It was instinct or stupidity or both that made me grab Laura's arms. We have to go, I said. We have to go now. But the police. We'll call from the diner, I said. We'll tell them. We'll meet them back here. Please, Laura, please. I dragged her to the car. We left the man's hat on the road like a bad flag. I was shaking so hard I could barely keep the dart from stalling out. We drove to the diner. I called 911 from the payphone, hands slippery on the receiver. I said there'd been a man in the road on River Road by mile marker 9, and he fell down the embankment, and we needed help. I didn't say my name. I didn't say I was the one who'd hit him. I couldn't make my mouth do it. When I hung up, Laura was staring out the window, not blinking. We should go back, she said. We will, I said. We're going. We are. We need to. I don't know. We need to tell the truth when there's someone besides me to hear it. We were 5 minutes out when a cascade of blue light lit the wet road in a way I'll see forever. 2 cruisers, one with its door open. A third car pulled nose in where it didn't belong. Expensive, not a cruiser. Laura's breath caught when she saw it. That's my dad's Buick. I parked behind a hedge of scrubby pines and we sat there like rabbits, small and frozen. I counted the seconds, rain thumping like a heartbeat on the roof. I saw her father, Captain Bennett, a tall man with the posture of someone who thinks the air itself is taking orders from him. He stood with another man, a thick-set guy in a bad suit, hair slicked back, a face like he'd been storing anger in it for decades. The new guy she'd mentioned. They were shouting at each other, but the rain in the distance turned it into a mush of sound. One of the officers swarmed down the embankment. Another stood near the guardrail, hands on hips, staring at the river like it owed him an explanation. Laura reached for the door. I grabbed her wrist. "Wait," I said. "What are we waiting for?" "For them to... I don't know. For it to be the right moment." She tore her arm away and stepped out. I scrambled after her, but I was too slow. She was practically running toward the lights. Captain Bennett's head snapped up and he started toward her so fast it looked like a cut in a movie. He took her by the shoulders and pulled her close and whispered something fierce right in her ear. The bad suit guy glared at me, then at the car, then back to me. In that moment I knew he'd remember my face forever, and not because he liked it. Laura looked over her father's shoulder and found my eyes, and something went wrong in them, like a flame sucking toward a draft. She nodded at whatever her father told her, like someone nods on a phone when the person on the other end is in charge of the rent. She half turned like she was going to wave me forward. Then she didn't. What happened next is the sort of thing you look back on 1,000 times trying to change with your mind. A diver arrived. They hauled the man out 10 minutes later on a stretcher, slick with river, a sheet over his face. Laura's father stared at the sheet, then at me, and I knew we were all going to have to pay a new kind of bill. I waited in my car like a fool. Laura never came to me. A young officer, ironically, a guy who'd graduated a year ahead of me, and once asked to borrow my guitar, walked over instead. He leaned down to my window and said, "Ray, best thing for you is to go home," like he was offering a cigarette and a favor all at once. "I was there," I said. "We hit him. It was an accident. Go home," he said sharper. "Captain's orders." I could have made a scene. I didn't. I drove home to my rented room over Mrs. Dugan's beauty shop and sat on the edge of my bed with my hands on my knees until the sun showed up. It was one of those rasped white sunrises that make a night look like it never happened. I didn't sleep. I went to the station at 8 and they were busy in a careful way, like a room full of men all trying not to look at the same thing. They told me to wait. Then they told me to go. Then they told me to wait again. Finally, Captain Bennett came out. He had a face like steel wool. He took me into an empty office. "What do I do?" I said. "I need to say what happened." "What happened," he said, "is that a drunk named Thomas Callahan, who has been warned off that road a dozen times, staggered into traffic and got himself killed. There isn't a mark on him that says your car did anything more than wake him up." "That's not true," I said. "We clipped him. He fell, Not a mark," he said, as if enunciating might make it legal. "The official report will say the river took him, which it did." "How is that possible?" I whispered. "I heard." "Here's what's going to happen," he said, and shut the door so gently that the latch didn't even click. "You are going to forget last night. You are going to stop calling my house and you are going to stop seeing my daughter. She is leaving for school, and that is the end of it. If you force this into the light, you will understand consequences in ways you don't have the imagination for." "I love her," I said, because at 20 we think that sentence is a spell. He looked at me like I'd offered him a handful of dirt. Then he smiled. I still dream about that smile. "You boys never understand that love and protection are sometimes opposites," he said. "Go home, Mr. Harper." I didn't go home. I went to the payphone and called Laura until the operator got tired of telling me the line was busy. I went to her house and her mother answered the door with eyes like she'd been crying, but didn't want anyone to suspect she'd learned how. "She's gone," her mother said. "Leave her be." She shut the door on my next question as if there weren't any more words in the world. 2 days later, I got a letter. It was my letter, actually, returned to me. The envelope worn like it had been in someone's pocket for a while. Inside was the necklace I'd given her at the fair, the little silver bird I'd saved up all July to buy. Nothing fancy, just a charm on a chain. No note, No explanation. Just the bird, small and stubborn in my palm. I kept calling and writing until it started to feel like I was chasing a ghost that refused to learn my name. I went back to the garage. I drank too much in a bar with a neon Miller sign that always buzzed. I stood on the riverbank and tried to be brave enough to hate the water, and then tried to be brave enough to forgive it. Someone told me Captain Bennett took early retirement and went to live with his brother in Michigan. Someone else said he was driving to the station one day and just kept going, straight north until the road ran out at Superior. You hear a lot of things. None of them tell you where your girl has gone. Time does its job if you let it. I let it, or it dragged me. I'm still not sure. I met a girl named Darlene at a 4th of July picnic. She was gentle and funny and had eyes that could lift you up out of a bad day like a crane. We got married in the VFW hall under blinking Christmas lights someone forgot to take down. We had one boy, Michael. He liked baseball and space and every dog that ever wagged at him. Life became a string of Fridays and oil changes and Little League games and Darlene humming while she cooked. You might think that's the dull part of the story, but it isn't. That's the gold. I love my wife. I did. Loving Darlene didn't erase Laura any more than learning to swim makes you forget the first time you drowned a little, but it made life something worthy again. Years folded. My hands got rougher. My hair got thin. I found new music and new jokes and new ways to lose and keep my temper. The town shrank around the edges. The bookstore closed. The bowling alley didn't. I got good at fixing transmissions and bad at remembering where I put my glasses. Sometimes late, I'd take out the silver bird and hold it. It felt like holding a prayer someone else forgot to bless. Then Darlene got sick. I don't want to set up shop in that part of the story for too long. If you know, you know. The house turned into a series of small medical stations. The pill organizer on the counter, the ginger ale bottles, the plastic cups with straws. Our son flew in when he could, but he had a job in Denver and a family starting there. And you can't stand on your boy's life and call it a ladder back to yours. We had hospice come in toward the end. The nurse assigned to us was named Ellie. Eleanor, she said, but she liked Ellie for everyday use. She had these calm hands that looked like they could fix a ripped cloud. She was in her late 20s, maybe early 30s. When you get old, it gets harder to call those ages by their names. She did something that won me forever the first week. She didn't talk around Darlene. She talked to her. She'd sit on the edge of the bed and ask real questions, not just how's your pain. She was friendly without being brave about it. Some people try too hard to be bright around the dying. It turns brittle. Ellie was warm in a human way that didn't demand anything back. One afternoon, I was doing dishes because if I didn't do something, my hands would fold into fists and stay that way. I heard Ellie humming in the bedroom. It stopped me like a hand flat on my chest. It was a little tune, nothing complicated. 3 notes up, 2 notes down. It was the tune I used to pick out on my porch in July when I was singing to mosquitoes, and the only person who knew it besides me was a girl sitting cross-legged on the steps with her braid undone. I walked to the bedroom door as if the floor might give way. Ellie stood by the window adjusting the blinds, softening the light, and humming my stupid old tune. "That song," I said. She looked up, gentle, the way you look at someone you don't want to startle. "Sorry," she said. "It's a habit. I hum when I'm thinking." "Where'd you learn it?" She shrugged. "Nowhere. It's just in there." She tapped her temple and smiled. "Feels like something I've always known." I went to the bathroom and shut the door and put my fist against my mouth until the good sense in me came back. I blamed it on the tiredness and the ache. We see ghosts when we're desperate enough, and sometimes they even hum for us. We lost Darlene in late fall when the maples turned the color of rusted pennies and the sky started practicing winter. Ellie came to the funeral even though she didn't have to. She hugged me and my son, and then she was gone. Like good people always are after they finish the work you can't thank them enough for. I went back to the house and touched all the things that still remembered Darlene's shape. Her robe, the dent in her pillow, the indentation in the carpet where her chair had stood. Grief is a full-time job with overtime. Nobody tells you how much nothing it pays. 2 months later, a letter arrived from a law office in Cleveland. The envelope had weight. Inside was a note on heavy paper that smelled like ink, real ink, not the cheap stuff, and a key. The note said, "Mr. Harper, my client, Mrs. Laura Bennett Whitaker, requested that a package be released to you upon her death. Please call the office to arrange pickup or delivery. Sincerely, Porter Sloan, LLP." I sat at the kitchen table with the letter and the key in one hand and the old silver bird in the other, and I thought I might be standing at the door to a room I'd already lived in but never really saw. Cleveland isn't far if you measure distance in miles, and much farther if you measure it in what your heart does at every exit. The law office looked like every law office in a movie book shelves. A receptionist who could organize a hurricane without getting flustered. A water cooler refusing to admit it was just a jug on a stand. Mr. Sloan was a neat man with hair that couldn't decide whether to quit or keep working. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said. "My loss?" "Mrs. Whitaker," he said. "She passed 6 weeks ago. Pancreatic cancer. It wasn't the first time the air had gone out of a room I was in, but it was the most specific." He slid a shoebox-sized package across the desk and went out to give me privacy. The box contained a stack of letters bound by a white ribbon, a cassette tape, a smaller envelope with my name in a handwriting I recognized even though it had learned decades I hadn't, and a photograph. In the photograph, Laura stood on a porch in a blue dress, holding a baby wrapped tight in a blanket. The baby's eyes were scrunched against the sun. Laura's eyes were not. They were aimed right at the camera in a way that made the person behind it feel like they'd been chosen and forgiven ahead of time. On the back, in that same tidy script, it said, "Eleanor, 1 day old, St. Catherine's, Fort Wayne, March 12, 1979. I opened the letter. "Dear Ray, I will not waste any of your time with the things I should have done. If there were a way to pay interest on regret, I'd owe a bank you can't see. I have wanted to write you since the night by the river. I wrote you that night, in fact, and then my father took the letter and said he would handle it, which is what he said about most things he broke. This is the truth, finally. I was pregnant. I was scared. I told my father 2 days before the accident. He told me I was a child with a child's brain, and that you would ruin me with your smallness. I'm sorry to write that. You were never small. I'm just telling you his words so you understand the force of them. That night, the man we hit was my father's informant. I didn't know it then. The man's name was Thomas Callahan, though in my head all these years he's been the riverman. My father and a new hire, Henry Russo, arrived almost as quickly as you left. I realize that sentence won't forgive you, and it isn't meant to. I would have stood by you no matter what. I always meant to. I started toward you, and my father put me in the Buick and drove me home. He said if anyone knew I'd been in the car, there would be scandal and ruin. His words again. He told me you were a coward for leaving. I know now that isn't fair. I didn't fight him, Ray. I thought I was protecting you and the baby and future all at once, and what I did was throw us into an emptiness. He sent me to my aunt in Indiana. I had our daughter at St. Catherine's 6 months later. I named her Eleanor because my grandmother had that name, and because it sounded like a word that could survive a winter. I held her for 2 days, and then I let a woman with soft eyes walk away with her. It broke me clean in two, and I was never able to glue myself back in exactly the same shape. I married a decent man years later. We tried for children and failed, and then stopped trying because hope can be a bully. When I got sick, I put my affairs in order. There are things I cannot fix. But here is one thing I'm giving you in case God still loves stories that wrap back on themselves. Eleanor signed a disclosure last year with the adoption agency that she is open to contact. She works as a nurse. She cared for me at the end without knowing I was her mother because I did not tell her. I was a coward in daylight instead of night. Her name is Eleanor Jameson. She hums when she's thinking. I gave her the silver bird. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I don't know how to end this except to say what should have started it. I loved you. I never stopped. Please, if you can find her, tell her I loved her too. Laura, I don't know how long I sat there with that letter in my hand and that new shape of the world walking itself around inside me. You can know something without knowing it, and then one day the knowing shows up in your kitchen with a suitcase and says, "Move over. I live here now." The adoption agency was still there, still as careful and bureaucratic as a church rummage sale run by lawyers. There were forms and polite emails and a social worker named Denise who said kind things like, "We'll take this one step at a time," which sounds like guidance until you remember every step requires a foot you're not sure you have. Weeks passed. I wanted to shake the calendar and make it give me more pages faster. I did not call my son because I didn't know how to tell him. I did not sleep much. I ate cereal like a teenage boy because it was there when I was too tired to cook. And then because stories are messy and Grace is rude, the answer came from the other end of the telephone. Denise emailed, "We have a match. Eleanor Jameson has also requested contact. She's given permission to share her number with you if you consent." I wrote back yes with my entire hand shaking. I waited until the sun went down like the phone needed darkness to work. I dialed the number. EY. She answered on the first ring. "Hello? Eleanor." My throat cramped around the word. "This is Ellie," she said. "Who's calling?" I had rehearsed this 100 times. My mouth didn't care. "My name is Ray," I said. "Ray Harper." Silence is a wild animal on a phone line. It paces. It sniffs the air. It decides whether to bite or curl up at your feet. Her voice, when it came, was careful. "Mr. Harper," she said. "I'm not going to push," I said. "I just wanted, no, that's not true. I wanted to do this right. I wanted to tell you that I knew your mother, Laura, and that I know who you are," she said. And in that half second, 6 directions of meaning flew through the room. Relief, fear, anger, wonder. I heard her take a breath. You don't happen to be the Ray I nursed through Mrs. Harper's." "I'm sorry. That's clumsy. Through her illness?" "Yes," I whispered. She made a sound that could have been a laugh and could have been a sob. "Of course you are," she said. "Of course." We met at a diner halfway between us. The waitress called everyone sweetheart, even if they were 2 burly men with beards. Ellie sat across from me in a blue sweater, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. She had a serious mouth and the kind of eyes that looked like they'd cataloged every heart in the room and found something to love in each one. Up close, I could see Laura in her, though that could be a trick of my old eyes making mosaics out of everything. She reached up and touched a necklace under her sweater without meaning to, a familiar gesture. She pulled it out, and the silver bird lay there in her palm, as bright and cheap and holy as ever. "My mother gave me this," she said. "Laura. She was my patient. She didn't tell me then. She called me afterward. We talked one time. She told me about you without saying your last name. She said, he'll know a song if he hears it. And then she died and I—" Ellie rubbed her thumb across the bird's wing the way a person rubs a worrystone. "I grew up in Fort Wayne. My parents, the ones who raised me, were good people. I had a good childhood. I don't want to betray that by saying it wasn't enough. It was. But there's been this hum in me. It sounds crazy. It doesn't sound crazy at all, I said. She laughed, a quick startled sound. When I realized the Ray you might be was you, I thought I had watched an entire love story without subtitles and then you turned the captions on. Do you know what I mean? I nodded. Too well. We talked for hours. I told her about the day I met Laura at the fair, about the milk bottle contraption with the rigged center of gravity, about the red skirt in the paperback, and the post-it notes we left each other in library books. I told her about the accident without making heroes or villains out of children who weren't qualified to hold either title. I told her about her grandparents, the good parts, Laura's mother's voice, the holiday cookies, and the bad Captain Bennett's iron, and his fear dressed up as discipline. Ellie listened like people used to listen to the radio, leaning in to catch the parts the static tried to steal. She told me about her life, Indiana schools, a science teacher who convinced her she could go to college, nursing school, the first time she aided in a birth and thought, this is where the door is between worlds, and I want to hold it open. She told me about a boy she loved and almost married, and how almost can feel like a medical condition for a while. She told me that sometimes she dreamed of a river she'd never seen. I've been angry at everybody and nobody for months, she admitted softly. At Laura for not telling me while there were more hours left. At the world for the way every decision my grandfather made cost other people pieces of themselves. At you for leaving that night even though I know you didn't really leave me. That's the worst part. Anger makes you dumb. It builds a house and tells you to move in, and you do, and then you can't find the door. I deserve some of that anger, I said. I should have stood by the road and shouted my name until they had to write it down. I don't know, she said. You were 20. She was 17. There were men there who had been 20 for 30 years. You can't beat that. She reached across the table and put her hand on mine. It was the hand that had closed Darlene's eyes, that had adjusted the blinds, that had hummed my porch song. It was my daughter's hand. I say that now like it's a sentence I deserve to own. That day it felt like a miracle I had to hold very carefully, 1 inch at a time. We didn't fix 40 years in one afternoon. That's something I want to be clear about for anyone listening who is hungry for the neat ending. We told each other where the hurts were. We didn't pretend different hurts don't disagree with each other. We agreed to try again, and then again, and then again after that. We met my son Michael where he could stand. He had a moment of sitting very still, and then he stood up and hugged Ellie and said, I had a sister all along, of course I did, which is the kind of sentence that earns him the good share in my heart for the rest of his life. Ellie started coming by on Sundays. We made pancakes. She taught me her trick for getting the edges crisp without burning the center. She told me about her patients, and I told her about cars that refused to admit what's wrong with them. She brought her dog, a mutt named June, who looked like 12 different breeds had decided to share one body. June decided I was hers, which is the only way you keep a dog. The first time Ellie called me Dad, she did it by accident. I said, yes? Like a man who had been standing at a bus stop for a long time and was suddenly sure the bus really was coming for him. There were twists after that too, because life isn't a graph you can draw with a pretty curve. The police captain, her grandfather, left a letter with Mr. Sloan as well. It arrived like a late thunderstorm. In it, he confessed to making a monster out of a mistake. He admitted he knew Thomas Callahan from the station, knew he shouldn't have been on the road that night, knew he'd been drinking. He admitted scaring me off and shipping Laura away and paying a diver to swear there were no signs of an impact. He wrote one sentence that knocked the wind out of me the same way his voice had all those years before. I believe protection started with control and ended with silence. He died in Michigan 2 years after that night. His brother wrote in a postscript, I never hated him properly when he was alive because his power blocked my angle. When that letter came, I started the work. Not of hating, of seeing. It was worse and better than hatred. It let me set the rock down without pretending it wasn't heavy. Ellie and I went to Laura's grave together. It's in a small cemetery in a town you'd never visit unless the dead you loved were there requesting company. The stone is simple. The grass is uneven. We brought flowers we didn't need because we had words. Ellie went first because that's how we do it. She says the brave sentences, and then I push my shaky ones into the same air after her. "Hi," she said, and her voice broke on that single syllable in a way that made me want to stand between her and the whole world. I wore the necklace. I've been practicing forgiveness. I'm not great at it yet. I'm sorry I wasn't ready when you were alive. I'm glad you were my beginning anyway. I put the silver bird on the grass. I had new one on my neck. She'd given me a matching charm for Father's Day, which, let me tell you, is a holiday that sits very different in a man's chest when it's brand new after 4 decades. I told Laura what you tell the dead when you've been carrying a secret with their name on it, that she had been my good thing and my bright ache, and that I was going to love our daughter in the open air, where love belongs. Some of you listening might be hungry for a scene with fireworks. Here's mine. It wasn't fireworks. It was a winter Tuesday, a year after we found each other. Ellie knocked on my door and came in with a stack of papers. "Dad," she said, easy at last, like the word had put on comfortable shoes. "I bought a little house on Maple. It needs help. I thought we could fix it up together. I can pay for the parts, but I have no idea how to replace a toilet. I watched 3 videos and now I am less sure than when I started." I laughed so hard I had to sit down. We fixed the toilet. We fixed the leaky sink. We hung shelves that were mostly level. We painted a spare bedroom green, even though nobody lived in it yet. We ate pizza on the floor and June leaned into my side as if she knew the exact shape of family and approved. The winter light came through the window in a way that made the dust look like confetti. If you want a miracle, there it is. A room for a future we hadn't met yet. Here's one more turn the road took that I didn't expect. One of Ellie's patients was a woman named Miriam who had been a teacher. She had a box of her old students' essays and wanted someone to read them because she was proud of them in a way that felt bigger than herself. Ellie took the box home, and we sifted through them at her kitchen table. There was a paper tucked between 2 others that wasn't a student's at all. It was a school program from 1980, an awards ceremony at a high school halfway between our town and Fort Wayne. Pinned to it with a rusty paperclip was a note in a tidy hand. For Laura. On the program, someone had circled a name. Eleanor Whitaker, Infant Care Clinic, Volunteer Award. Ellie laughed. "I volunteered at the clinic where my birth mother gave me up," she said. "You can't make that up." You can't make any of it up, which is the trouble and the grace. The truth doesn't care if it sounds like a cliche. It cares if you carry it faithfully. I started this channel after I retired. It was something to do with all the words I had stored. A neighbor kid showed me how to set up a ring light and talk to it like it was a person. It still feels silly, me waving at a green dot. But then you comment and you tell me your stories and I realize that dot is a door. If you take anything from this one, take this. A lie doesn't have to be a sentence to ruin a life. It can be a gesture. It can be a door closing softly. It can be a good intention in a uniform. But here's the second part. Truth shows up anyway. It rides in on a song you didn't think anyone else remembered. It stands in your kitchen with a letter and a key. It sits across from you in a diner with a silver bird in its palm. It calls you dad. And when it does, you don't have to be ready. You just have to say yes and then keep saying yes until the yes becomes the life you're living. These days on Sundays, Ellie comes over and we cook too much food. Michael comes when he can. My grandson, Tyler, yeah, that happened. Turns out life gives you bonus rounds if you stick around long enough. Sits on my lap and asks me to tell the story about the fair and the rigged milk bottles. June lies under the table like a loaf of bread. Sometimes I turn on the old radio and find a station that plays the kind of guitar I used to think would save me. And I play the 3 notes up and 2 notes down, and Ellie hears it from the kitchen and whistles along. We're not fixing the past. We're just setting a place for it at the table and saying, eat. And it does, and we do, and somehow we all get a little less hungry. I know some of you will ask if I forgave Captain Bennett. I don't know if forgive is the right word for a man who built a maze and then got lost in it himself. I can tell you that I put down the hate the day I held his letter and felt how heavy fear is when it dresses itself as love. I can tell you I visit Laura's mother sometimes in the assisted living home 2 towns over. She doesn't remember me, not really. Her mind lets go of people the way a dandelion lets go of seeds. I bring her lemon cookies because someone told me they were her favorite when she was young. She says, "Don't I know you?" And I say, "You do," because it's the truest answer I've got. One last little twist because life enjoys them. A month ago, I got a message through the channel from an old friend, the officer who leaned in my car window that night and told me to go home. He's retired too, he said. "I should have done better by you." I wrote back, "Me too." Sometimes that's all you can do with the past. Nod at it, acknowledge you were 2 different people at 2 different ends of the same mistake, and see if there's any decent way to finish out the day. If you're out there holding a silver bird in your palm, literal or not, and wondering if it still means what it used to, hear an old man clearly: love doesn't vanish. It changes shape. It waits. It hums to itself in rooms where you think nobody's listening. It shows up wearing somebody you haven't met yet. It asks for pancakes in a green room and a dog that steals socks. It doesn't fix the damage, but it chooses you again in the present tense, which is the only tense we get to live in. So that's the story. It's long and it's old and it's mine, and if it landed in your chest somewhere soft, I'm grateful you made the space. And if you're new here, if you just wandered in from another video or a bored evening, welcome. Do me that favor I asked at the start, would you? Hit subscribe. 96% of you still aren't subscribed, and I can't pretend that doesn't make me a little sad. It helps more than you know. Smash that like button. Someone young told me I had to say it that way and leave a comment. Tell me about the song you thought only you remembered. Tell me if you ever found family when you weren't looking for it, or forgiveness when you weren't sure it fit. I'm Ray. This is Mind-Blowing Stories. Thanks for being here, for listening to an old man's heart trying to tell the truth, and for giving me something I didn't know I needed until you gave it to me. A place to put it.